Hi, I'm Tom Migot from Tom Migot Photography. Welcome to this series where we learn about Photoshop step by step. In a previous episode, we talked about the Marquee Tool, which is a tool very useful when you want to make a selection in Photoshop. But I've realized today that I forgot to mention a couple of features that are quite interesting. So instead of covering another tool inside Photoshop, I wanted to make this quick video to show you those features. And we start by opening a new canvas. And here I want to make sure that my canvas is actually going to be transparent. So make sure that the background content is set to transparent and click OK. Now I'm going to zoom in, Control 0 or Command 0 if you're on the Mac. And you know you're dealing with a transparent canvas here because the background shows you this checker pattern. So the last time around, I showed you that you could click, when the Marquee tool is selected, you could click and drag and make your selection. But we were operating inside the normal style of the Marquee tool. And you see here at the top, you have a bar and it says style normal. If you click on normal, you could actually change the style to, let's say, fixed size. And here you notice that we are actually able to set a dimension for the width and the height. And so now if I click, I don't need to drag anymore because Photoshop already knows what my widths and heights are and it draws the selections for me. But it shows me a little black window with the X and Y coordinates, which will obviously change as I move my selection around. You also notice that here I'm dealing with centimeters. I could choose any unit that I want, so let's imagine 200 pixels by 200 pixels. And now if I click once, well, I have a square of 200 pixels by 200 pixels. It doesn't matter. You could really use all the units you want in Photoshop. And if you don't know all the units that you can use in Photoshop, well, simply you can go to Photoshop CC Preferences. On the Mac, it's under Photoshop CC Preferences, and then you go to Unit Rulers. On the PC, the preferences are under the Edit menu. So you would do Edit, Preferences, Units, and Rulers. And now here you see we have a little panel here top left where we set the unit for the ruler. And here you have all the options you can choose. By default, the unit is set to pixels. And it's talking about rulers because you could actually reveal the rulers on your working areas. To do this, you could just click View and Rulers, or Control or Command R on the Mac. And you see here we have a ruler. But although the ruler is set to pixels, if I go back to, let's say, 1 centimeter by 3 centimeters, you notice that it still works. You don't need to have exactly the same unit used by the fixed size and the ruler. So just something to bear in mind. If here we have a rectangle, but the rectangle is kind of a vertically oriented, and you could maybe want something else. You may want to have exactly the same rectangle with the same dimension, but more horizontally oriented. And you could swap the values for the widths and heights in that case. And this is what we do by clicking this little arrow button here. And now if I click, I have the same rectangle, but oriented differently. Another style is the fixed ratio. And here you set the ratio between the width and height. So by doing 1, 1, obviously you're going to have a square, but you need to click this time and drag it because although you fix the ratio, which is 1, 1, but you could have a small square or a big square. And again, you could swap the values, which here doesn't make much difference because it's 1, 1, but if I had 2 to 1 and I just click and drag, I have a rectangle. And same, the ratio is 2 to 1, and I could swap that ratio doing 1 to 2. So I just thought those were interesting to know. I appreciate that it might not be that useful when you do photography inside Photoshop, unless you maybe want to do some framing around your photograph, and we'll do this in future episodes. But bear in mind, Photoshop is much more than just a photography tool. And you can do a lot of design for the web or else where you would actually need to work with specific dimensions. And being able to actually set the ratio or the fixed size actually would be interesting. Another cool feature I want to show you is now if I actually make a selection just like this, and I want to fill a color like we did the last time, so edit, fill, and I want to fill it with my foreground color. And you can see that my foreground color is black and my background color is white. So I leave it to foreground and now it's painted in black. Well, if I actually wanted to move my selection, you remember that when I move my cursor from outside the selection to inside the selection, my cursor icon changes, and now I no longer have the sniper cross, I have a white arrow with a little selection icon underneath it. And that means that if I click and move, I can move my selection, but what I do not do, I do not cut that zone that was delimited by that selection. Instead, if you wanted to move it, you would need to actually press a key before clicking, and that would be the control key on PC or command key on the Mac. And suddenly you notice that the icon for the cursor changes, and we now have a black arrow and we have a pair of scissors. And so if I now click and just move it around, I basically cut the content that was selected and I move it around. In fact, if I make another selection, so I deselect, Control or Command D, and now I make a selection inside it, and I press the Control or the Command key and I just click and move it around, you notice that I really cut the content, and now I can reveal the checkers background, the checkers pattern, so my transparent background. One thing to know though is that if I make a selection purely on the transparent background like this, and I attempt to do the same thing, so I enter my cursor in, and I couldn't move my selection, you see I moved my selection, but if I try to actually press the Control key or the Command key on the Mac and I click and drag, suddenly I get a warning. It says that I cannot move the selection because the selected area is empty, and this is pretty obvious. There was no information. Remember, my background was transparent and there is no data there, whereas when I deal with the black here, I could do this. I have some black information here, so if I press the Control or the Command key and I click, I can now move it around because I have some information that I'm moving, that I've been able to cut. But something interesting happens though if your canvas is not transparent. So let's see what happens. I'm making a new canvas, and instead of being transparent this time, I'm setting it to white. And I click OK, and I'm going to zoom in. I want first to actually change the colors. So instead of black, let's make it red, and here instead of white, let's make it blue. And I'm going to make a selection now. So I make this selection, but what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to fill that selection like we did in the past. No, because we already have some information. You see, my background, my canvas is not transparent, it's white. There is some white information. So if I move my cursor inside the selection now, and I press the Control, the Command key, I see the scissors. What do you think you're going to see if I actually click and drag? Well, are we going to see the checkers? Not quite. You see, I'm moving it around, I'm cutting my selection, but I don't see the checkers. Why? Because that canvas has never been transparent. That canvas was white, and so Photoshop had to somehow show you a color, and it's showing you the background color. So that's something to bear in mind. If you're actually cutting the canvas directly, what it will reveal, as long as your canvas has a color, right, it will reveal your background color. So here if I deselect, for example, and I'm changing my color, and I'm just going to for purple, and I click OK. And let's make another selection right here. I enter it, I press the Control, the Command key, and I click around and I move. And you notice now it reveals the new background color. So that's just something to bear in mind. And things happen the same way if your background was actually black. So let's make a new canvas just for the sake of it, and let's make it black. Here you notice background color is set to black. I click OK. I can zoom in, and then now I make a selection. I enter it, press the Control Command key, click, drag, and it reveals my my background color. And I can move my selection around. So this is all I wanted to share with you today, those couple of features. I hope you found those informative, so let me know in the comments. In the next episode, we'll talk about another tool inside Photoshop, and until then, this is Tom Migot saying if you like it, well, capture it and maybe play with Photoshop. Ciao.